Hello and welcome to the ChinnyVision podcast, an occasional delve into the yesteryears of home computing with the people who were actually there. Very excited to have my guest today. It's Mr. Ken Shabby, John Rain from Smershpod. Hi, John.
Hello, Chinny.
And I think, first of all, we better explain what Smershpod actually is.
It's a podcast about Bond and Bond-related things, but it's kind of, as it's increasingly getting older, it's kind of going off the map rather than doing whatever I feel like doing, really.
It's enjoyable listening. I can picture myself where I was listening to certain Smershpods, driving down the M6 in Cumbria, listening to the Prince of Thieves one, for example. So it places me on these kind of long journeys that I go on. And the reason I asked you on, because of course, computer conversions, we'll come on to this, but I thought, who's going to be really good to talk about the kind of conversions of yesterday and how they compare to the films? So we'll come on to that. But where did your home computing journey begin?
Well, the first one I remember us getting was an Auric.
Oh.
And then my brother got a 48K.
But tell us all about the Auric, because we don't get many Auric owners on here. There aren't many of you.
Yeah, I don't know, really. I was very young, and I remember I was just suddenly having this white sort of carbuncle in the front room. I seem to remember it didn't have many games.
No.
Really?
No, it didn't.
Did it have the Ant one?
No, it didn't have... I don't think it had Ant Attack, no. It didn't have much of anything. I've recently acquired one and had things like Manic Miner, but it's like a more powerful Spectrum. Better graphics, better sound, but no games.
Nothing. I think we ended up getting rid of that and getting a Spectrum, and then we were flying, really. I remember my brother getting a Spectrum and having Manic Miner and things like that, and that's where it began, really.
So you're playing Manic Miner, you're playing other games?
I remember my brother got Manic Miner, and I bought The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh.
Or was it Star Wars? It was going on to what you were mentioning earlier, it was a conversion of the arcade.
So you go vector graphics, the arcade experience in your home computer.
Exactly. Yeah. And things like, Monty on the Run.
Very much a competitor to Manic Miner and Jet Set Willy.
Exactly. But it's also the things like, I remember getting like Decathlon, a lot of button mashing games where we'd kill the keyboard and things like that. So it was all the early 48K stuff. And it was only when really I got I remember getting, I think it was the 128K Spectrum where it had the red hot radiator on the back of it.
The 128K with the bit on the side.
On the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
which
collectible
got
now.
Red hot.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was a major triumph because it meant that I could play Renegade and flip people over the side of things. Because you couldn't do that in the 48K.
It's interesting, you go from the 48K to the 128K, and that's a relatively short time frame. What kind of made you want to get the 128K?
I think I was just told about it. I think it was probably my brother got one first because he was 5 years older than me, so there was a thing there. But I think he sold it to me as, it was better graphics or whatever, or better all round, really.
And so you're playing Renegade and you're playing these other games, so it's kind of your games are expanding.
Yes.
Out. You're not doing anything else on this computer, you are just playing games.
No, apart from occasionally doing mild, like go to ...
Yeah.
No, I was mainly using it for games. We can say this now because I'm not going to go to prison, but obviously you could borrow a game off someone and tape it, which seems insane now.
So you've got a big scene at school there with other Spectrum owners.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we were lending each other, or someone would give you a copy. That was the benefit of it, definitely. And obviously you could do that. Because after the Spectrum, I then got a Commodore 64. I went to the dark side. I didn't like it very much, but I went there because it was colour and it felt more exciting.
And again, because you're going from your swapping games to your Spectrum owning friends to your C64 owning friends, presumably.
I seem to remember that's one of the reasons why I did it, because I went around my friend's house and he had one. I had two friends who had other computers to me. One had an Amstrad, which again seemed quite exciting because it was colour and looked shinier. And then I went to my other friend and he had a C64. And I can't remember what game it was he had, but it just seemed really vibrantly exciting. It might have been something like Turtles or something. And I got one, but I didn't have it for very long because then my brother got an Amiga. So
again, it was very quick progression between the machines. During this Spectrum and C64 times, again, any of these kind of the games you're playing on that 64...
I don't remember the 64. I don't think I had it very long. I had the Spectrum for a long time, and all the classic Spectrum games I was playing on there, like all the Ultimate Play the Game games. And obviously, as you mentioned earlier, all the film tie-ins, I was getting all of them and getting very disappointed. I remember waiting by the letterbox for my copy of Red Heat to arrive. And it was just one of the most disappointing things. And I remember I got family up in Liverpool, and we were up there, and I bought The Living Daylights, and we've talked about that on one of your previous shows.
I mean, that was an interesting game to go through because, of course, it's a well-known film, and they try and follow the movie, and that's the kind of thing with these games. Had you seen The Living Daylights when you got the game? Or
I had, yeah. But if I hadn't, I'd have suspected that the whole plot of The Living Daylights was just James Bond running from right to left, shooting at people, popping their heads over rocks.
I mean, it's better than View to a Kill from Domark, which was did anyone get off the first level? I don't think I did. I remember driving into
3D
walls.
one?
Yeah, you could have driving a car. It's a long time since I played it. My mate had it as well, and I just remember being in this kind of car or something and just stuck against walls the entire time and not getting anywhere. Perhaps I'll have to revisit it.
But what I loved most about having a Spectrum was when they started doing the budget tapes in Woolworths. So there'd be like a little carousel, and it was like they called that Hit Squad and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and you could get a really classic game for like $2.99 or something, I think it was. And I used to get a load of those. Real classics are ones that I still have a fondness for now, but if I played them now, they'd probably be like Heavy. Was it Heavy on the Magic?
Quite a few of those gargoyle games in that style. And yeah, you're right. They games coming out 18 months, 2 years, sometimes less than even 18 months onto budget and giving you that chance to own it, especially because budget games are more widespread than full price games.
Isn't that how, what they called that games company who now do like Colin McRae and stuff? Didn't they start doing budget games?
Codemasters, yeah, they were doing original titles with very, very few re-releases. Mr. Angry was one that was actually a re-release, but most of the Codemaster stuff in the early days was original content.
Yeah.
Where you had your Hit Squad, which was just re-releasing Ocean games, Kix doing US Gold games.
That's right.
And Mastertronic doing original games, but actually doing other stuff on their different labels.
But it was just such an exciting time because there were so many games around, and it even informed what you were doing. Because I was a really big fan of Grange Hill, so I had the Grange Hill game, and then I went to senior school and I had things like Back to School and School Days where you could call a teacher Mr. Tits, and it was all fair game and fun.
I thought you were going to say that I went to secondary school, fell over a paving slab and died from the Grange Hill game.
That's right.
Oh dear, that's a thing. We can only license Gaunch, Hollow, and Mr. Griffiths, and nobody else.
No, because Mr. Griffiths asked for £1 million, so they gave it to him. They couldn't afford anybody else.
They couldn't afford anyone else.
That was the game where you'd meet like junkies and things. They'd offer you drugs.
Yes,
yeah.
And if you accept, obviously, everything in the Grange Hill game kills you. And when you do you're supposed to climb in through the ducts of the school with Hollow following you, except Hollow just kind of randomly starts falling through the screen because they haven't really coded it properly that far because I don't think they thought anyone would get into the school. So the game just breaks, basically.
But I used to like that. I used to like activating things in the games that are there to stop you doing things. I remember the game of Minder.
Yeah, oh yes.
If you swore at someone, it thumped you. That was always fun.
It's these unlikely games, isn't it? You think, they could do all these properties that kids would buy that would appeal to them. And no, we're going to do Minder.
I found out recently there was an Hello game.
Yes, alternative, yes. It's about 1992, something like that, 93. It's when they did that tie-up with BBC Enterprises and they did Dalek Attack as well.
But then there's the crushing disappointment was something that I remember greatly. Is like, for instance, like when I was a little kid, I was really into Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. And they did a Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds game. And it was just so boring.
It's kind of strange what they did games of, because you've got the kind of big names like your Rambos, your Batmans, Total Recall, and then you've got the weird ones like, of all movies to convert, Give My Regards to Broad Street.
Oh God, yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Just why not do the frog song with Paul McCartney? Because it's part, I know they showed it kind of as an intro to Give My Regards to Broad Street, but you think that'd be more, we could do a Rupert the Bear frog song. No, we're doing the film.
But the Debbie Does Dallas game was great.
But, I mean, you got all these films around this time, like written down a list of games they never converted. They could have done something like Whoops Apocalypse, Clockwise, which everyone knew.
Yeah.
Buster, 1988, that's peak licensing time.
Buster.
Why not have Phil Collins in a game running off to Brazil or Argentina, wherever it is.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Favourite of yours. Not the TV quiz, the movie. Michael Winner, Bullseye.
Perfect.
Could have done that. Chariots of Fire, A Fish Called Wanda, Cannon and Balls, Boys in Blue. Why not?
Crying out for a game, that is.
You could do Cannon and Ball in the game. Who wouldn't buy that? They're only cartoon stripping looking. Why not give them a computer game?
Idiots. Too busy making games of things like Platoon. Platoon, when you bought it, you'd open the box and you'd have the game on one cassette and the Smokey Robinson song Tracks of My Tears, which is the theme to Platoon, on another cassette. What do I want that for? I'm a 9-year-old boy.
It'd be duplicated onto because you used to get, sometimes they put soundtracks in games like Outrun, and the thing is, it'd usually be duplicated in mono onto a computer quality cassette. So it would sound crap. It'd sound like you'd gone down the newsagent, bought the cheapest Maxim tape, the ones we got like 5 for £1.
Yes,
and
exactly.
recorded it off the radio, and it would just be like terrible.
I've got a copy of Shadow Warriors. I've still got it here from when I was a kid. And that came with a little plastic bag. Now, I imagine that was to put over your head when you see how bad it is compared to the Amiga and arcade versions.
Things like Turtles. Biggest game of 1990, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And because the game's a bit lackluster and was late coming out, they give you a set of Panini stickers, a fake tattoo transfer, and a badge.
I can wear them while I play this terrible game. Thank you. It's like Ghostbusters 2. That game was awful. And that came with a balloon.
I don't know if I got a balloon with mine. They throw these things in, and it's like surely the game is what sells it. But of course, that's not how the marketing people think.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'd switched from Spectrum. I think I had an Amiga by the time this came out. My friend bought a Plus 3. A Spectrum were on a disc. They didn't last very long, did they, the Plus 3?
They withdrew them just after the Amstrad CPC Pluses came out. So 1990 they were withdrawn, although you could still buy them. But yeah, they went out of production in 1990.
Oh, I remember going around my friend's house and I think he had Street Fighter 2 on it. And I had an Amiga at the time, and I was just thinking, what are you doing? What are you bothering with this for? It's
an amazing technical marvel. If you got that on cassette, because you had to load in both fighters separately and then the background. Although you could opt out of the background, but it still has to load both fighters in and play against no background, and it would take forever.
Because this seems insane now. Because I think my mind has long pulled out all those memories of like setting a game going and then going down for your tea, and then coming up just for the final, which I've long sort of dismissed from my memory. But imagine that.
I think it's one of the biggest Spectrum multi-loads ever. And to be fair, it's a technical achievement. To be fair, when you're playing, you're thinking, well, I'm playing Street Fighter 2 on a Spectrum, but after your 30 seconds of being Hadoukened in the head and you've got to load the intro up again, you kind of think, yeah, this isn't really much fun.
I mean, that is like saying I've made a suicide machine. It's a great technical achievement. It doesn't mean it's going to be any good for you in the long run.
But it's these bigger kind of games coming onto the systems, and you're there with an Amiga now.
Yeah.
And what are you playing on there?
I was really obsessed with all the Cinemaware stuff.
Yeah.
I know ultimately they couldn't kind of deliver, but the presentation and the artwork of them was so good.
It's fascinating watching people play those through online where they know what they're doing, because I usually end up being eaten by ants or something fairly early on.
Yeah, I loved Wings. It Came from the Desert. I still to this day had no idea at the time they made a sequel, which I'm fascinated to see. And I loved I loved their sports ones as well. They did a very good American football one. They did a very good basketball one.
The thing that always struck me, though, going from the 16-bit to the 8-bit, and I don't know if you found this, because I was late going to the 16-bits, partly for this reason, is ultimately you're sitting there playing Robocop on your Spectrum, or Amstrad in my case, and yeah, it looks rough, but actually, and I kind of find this when I come to review these games again all these years later, is you play Robocop on the Amstrad, it's great, play it on the Amiga, looks far nicer, sounds far nicer, doesn't play quite as well, and you're paying 2.5 times the money to do this.
I think you're right. Oh, I've remembered the big title I had on my Commodore.
Oh, yeah.
Last Ninja 2.
Ah, well, there's a game.
That was the one. And there was another one, Vendetta. Again, they looked really good. But Last Ninja 2 was one that I was just... It was like one you'd show off to people.
It's an amazing game. It's 2 on the... 2's on all sorts of systems, but I think is it 1 or 2 that's on the BBC Micro? And you go, wow, it's on the BBC Micro. That doesn't look any good, but it's on the BBC Micro. But it's it's a fantastic game, that kind of isometric.
Yeah.
It's not kind of, I wouldn't say sandbox, but you can kind of run around in any order you want to an extent.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool sort of, almost like a point and click adventure game, except, as you say, it's you can run around and do flying kicks at people and stuff and hit them with a sword. That's great.
With the Amiga, are you playing any other kind of games, simulations, or
there was one called Stunt Rider or something?
Stunt Car Racer?
Yeah, where you could jump over those big ramps and stuff like that.
Jeff Crammond, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a first-person view inside the... That was the one I played a lot. The Batman on the Amiga I really liked, because it was the Batman film and I was still kind of obsessed with it.
That's the film version, because of course we had the Cape Crusader the year before.
Yes.
Just finished playing that. Then you had Batman the movie, 89, big game. Was that bundled with your Amiga, or did you get it separately?
It was bundled with my Amiga, but I also had it on my old Spectrum as well.
Oh, right.
So I remember that getting 5 out of 5 in was it in Crash or your Sinclair, one of the two?
It's that template Ocean movie conversion. Level 1, walking, left to right, up and down, and so on, platformer. Level 2, you got something with cars or vehicles. Level 3, back to, they did that on so many of their games.
They did that with I remember the Untouchables came out as a game, and it was basically exactly the same as Batman.
You had some shooty... Did you have shooty bits in Batman? I can't remember.
No, in Batman you had driving bits.
Yeah. So it's like Total Recall the following year is the same kind of, Except it's got more platforms and more kind of keys and things to wander around, things to activate and jump on. But it is, again, it's like we've got Batman. That sold really well. So what we're going to do is do Total Recall and do it the same way.
But I remember but sometimes they'd be innovative, especially Ocean, because I remember they did Nightbreed.
Yeah.
And I had the is that the interactive game?
Yeah, I don't know if I've played it, but I know the one you mean. I remember it being advertised.
And it was one of those ones where they clearly wanted to do something with it, but they didn't have the ability to do what they wanted. So it kind of goes halfway and it's a bit boring and disappointing.
It's these,
I like that.
These coding teams would get 8-12 weeks if they were lucky to do this entire thing. Sometimes games would fall through and they'd end up with another coding. I think Total Recall was in the hands of one team. It was going so wrong, it was thrown in with someone else with like a month to go. And it's like, you've just got to do a game. And it's like, they're just hammering out a game.
Is that why the characters look so odd?
I was never sure if they didn't have the license to use Arnie's likeness other than digitizing the artwork, or they just couldn't be bothered doing Arnie. But he's on the loading screen, but that is just a digitized picture of the movie image. So I think some of these games, there was an issue with you cannot make the sprite look too much like the person because you've got to pay extra.
In the 90s, we had a load of movie tie-ins, because especially Ocean, because they had things like Navy SEALs, and then you had Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Oh, there was just so many. It was difficult to keep up.
Movies that essentially flops, like Navy SEALs, were hits as computer games. Ocean pushed that so much. That advert was everywhere on all formats. And the movie pretty much, I don't know if it tanked, but it wasn't, no one went to see it, I don't think. And, we all saw it on TV afterwards, but it was but we saw it because of the computer game. Because the computer game was, Ocean would do this thing of just pushing their stuff so much, even when games weren't released. Toki on the Amstrad CPC or GX4000, heavily promoted in the Amstrad magazines with adverts, never came out. Because Ocean would just blanket bomb everything just to make sure their games got that promotion.
But then you had it the other way around, where they released RoboCop 3 a couple of years before the film.
Yes. I wonder if that was... I always wondered if the Batmans were because they had... they did the Cape Crusader and the first... the the isometric game on the Spectrum and Amstrad and C64. Then they did the Cape Crusade and they did the movie. And I don't know if that's because they had a multi-year tie-in with DC, or DC were like, okay, you've done a good job before. And you don't know, because they were pretty much for movie conversions by the early 90s, the only game in town.
Yes, that's right. And they were pretty good at it. I remember I phoned them once.
Right.
Yeah, because there was posters being advertised in all the Amiga magazines for ages about RoboCop 2, and I think it came out quite late. And I remember I had a poster for their game on the wall, and I saw the number on it, and I rang them and said, "When's RoboCop 2 coming out?" And they said, "Oh, next year sometime." And it was true. But I actually got to phone Ocean, so that's quite fun.
And they're doing all these games. They got things like The Simpsons, which they licensed before anyone knew it was going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
And it all culminates with them spending £1 million licensing Jurassic Park for the SNES and other systems. And that's kind of, that's the ultimate kind of, here we are spending £1 million on this property. That was the peak of it, I suppose.
It's another one of those Jurassic Park games. There's a couple of them where the aim of the game is to murder dinosaurs. I kind of think that's against what John Hammond was for, to be honest. But yeah, you're chucking grenades. That's a terrible game. Jurassic Park one. It feels like they had no idea what to do with it.
A lot of money and kind of what do you do with it? But it's the same for a lot of these, and then obviously things change and move on to these more what we call AAA games, and things change from these kind of like 3 people in a shabby flat somewhere knocking this game out to kind of teams of hundreds.
Yeah, because that moves on to where I went after the Amiga. After the Amiga, I got a Mega Drive. That was mainly for Sonic. I did have a Game Boy briefly, because everyone did. It was the law. But I got Mega Drive for Sonic 2.
And there's that moment when did you first see Sonic and go, oh my God, that thing's moving like a bat out of hell?
Yeah, I think it was in a computer game shop. I think I was in there getting something, and it was on the TV, and I just thought, goodness me. I just thought, I really want that. And I managed to get one. But after that, I didn't go back to any kind of computer. It was all consoles from then on.
We go from computers, and some people migrate to PCs, but you go to consoles and ultimately ends up with the PlayStation and GameCube or whatever it was, the N64 and GameCube by then, and so on. And it changes from that kind of homebrew, but that kind of more homely feel of this Spectrum game on a tape to a big kind of thing you can buy in any shop. You go into HMV, Virgin Megastore, what have you, there's your PlayStation game. It's
sad, really, because when you I think I read something or saw something where someone was saying that all the old developers who were making stuff for cassettes, when cartridges came along, they had to pay a fortune.
It became really hard.
Yeah, to get their games onto a cartridge. It's
a different thing. The Pigford brothers, who we see online, did games like Zub on the Spectrum, were early people to move over to the Nintendo Entertainment System. They moved early, I think about 87, 88, something like that. And of course it becomes, you have to have approval from Nintendo. Everything has to go through Nintendo and all the manufacturing. And you're suddenly going from knocking out a game in 8 weeks, like Feud and Zub, to spending 9 months developing a game. It's a complete sea change, that transition.
It's a shame, because often now and then I have these little pockets of melancholy where I just think I'd like to just go back and play Werewolves in London all day.
That's a great sandbox game.
That was a great game. I don't know why no one's ever remade it. It's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, wandering around, killing people by night and kind of by day, just kind of trying to solve the puzzle. Going on the tube, getting yourself electrocuted and
getting beaten up by policemen.
Getting beaten, and the more and more policemen, and of course the story of that is Ariolasoft went bust just before it was ready, so it's not really finished. It's a bit buggy. I think the Amstrad version was first out, or first to be reviewed anyway, and it crashes a bit when you get a bit further into the game. And
I remember reading it's impossible. You can't finish it. I remember reading.
It certainly, whenever I've got too far into the game, it just seizes up on the Amstrad.
Oh, right.
And Mastertronic bought the rights to it and stuck it straight out at not $2.99, $1.99.
Yeah, that must have been where I got it from because I just loved the cover and it was all about werewolves.
Oh, I remember the artwork in CMVG when it was originally supposed to be released, and that werewolf full page, Areola Soft, and it was Viz Design, and just that striking look. And of course, it's not tied into the movie.
No,
and that's clever.
Yeah,
because you think it is.
And it's a bit like Grand Theft. It's like an early version of Grand Theft Auto for me because, like, I used to play Grand Theft Auto mainly just to drive around and shooting people. I used to play Werewolves of London just to eat people. It's a great laugh running around eating everyone.
It is. The bodies piling up and seeing how many police officers you can get onto the screen before it chronically slows down on the Amstrad. You put 10 people on the screen and suddenly it's chugging to keep this updated. How far did you get into it?
Not far at all. I don't remember playing it in terms of like trying to complete things or anything. I just remember being a werewolf and eating everyone.
I think I got to about 4 crosses before it crashed on me, but I never realised that. I knew you could go through the drains to get to different sections, but you could also turn you can turn the electricity off on the railway or the underground, and you can go through to other bits there as well. And I'd never worked that out.
Oh God, they should remake that? It would be brilliant.
One game I do want to mention to you is, and I don't know if you ever played it, The Spy Who Loved Me, being Bond.
It was a rip-off of Spy Hunter, wasn't it?
Yes, and it picks up the plot halfway through the game. It picks up the plot the moment the Lotus comes out the water. The Lotus gets delivered. Sorry, the Lotus gets delivered.
Like in Spy Hunter.
By Q, yeah. And then that's where it picks up the plot. And you're thinking, hang on a minute, it got all this stuff before then on the rooftop, with the fight and everything else, and it's the pyramids. But no, we're just going to rip this off, and then we do the underwater section, and you got the bit in the base at the end, climbing on the globe security camera thing.
I didn't even get that far. I just kind of dismissed it because I loved Spy Hunter. That was a game I loved. And it was just like that, but not as good. So I just don't think I really...
Indeed.
Like the Live and Let Die game as well was just driving a speedboat. That was it.
They're trying to kind of go, right, we're not going to follow this precisely now because we've tried doing that with the other games. So we're going to just pick up the best action sequences from the game. But the problem is when you're going to do that and rip off a better game, you've got a bit of an issue if you can't make it as good as that game, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, because every Bond game was just got worse. Because I remember the License to Kill game was just so infuriatingly hard.
Yeah, I started trying to review that and kind of put it aside for another day, put it like that.
Yeah.
And that does start with the start of the movie.
Yeah, it does.
But
it's you in the Coast Guard helicopter, yeah, but it's just insane. It reminded me a bit of, what was it called? Was it Silkworm or something like that?
Silkworm's a side scroll. Swiv, it reminds me. Yeah, Swiv. Do you still play games today or not really? Or?
No, I don't. I bought a PlayStation 4 when that came out, but it's now belongs to my children. I don't play games at all anymore. I remember the first time I realised I can't play games anymore. Someone bought me Far Cry 3, I think it was. And I started playing it, saw how vast the map was, and I just thought, I can't be bothered with this.
They require these modern games. You can't just pick them up and play them.
No.
They require so much time.
There's like an hour of cutscenes before you can actually play it as well. So I just can't. I haven't got time to do much these days, but gaming is gone now. The last game I really played, and I completed it, was Red Dead Redemption 2, just because that was quite chilled out. Some nights you could just pick it up and just ride your horse about. Or if some nights you could pick it up and do bank robberies and stuff like that, it was quite fun. So
that's the GTA thing, isn't it? You can just kind of, if you want to have a drive around the city, you can just drive around the city.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, John, thanks for joining me today. Where can people find your output online?
If you just Google Smershpod Acast, you'll find the show there. I also do a Doctor Who podcast called A Wheezing Groaning Sound with Tom Crowley and Paul Litchfield. Yeah, I did a book called Thunderbook, The World of Bond According to Smershpod. If you get the second edition of that, which came out earlier this year, it's got all 25 and Never Say Never Again in there. And Controversial. And I also did a book about action movies called Exploder Book, which came out this time last year, which is available. And if you could just go to my website if you want, it's all there. It's www.john-rain.co.uk.
Check those out, especially Thunderbook on Amazon by John Rain. So thanks for joining us today here on ChinnyVision, John.
Thank you very much for having me. A big fan.
Cheers.